Thank you all very much. I'd like to thank Brad and David for the invitation to come to Chicago, the city of broad shoulders. My wife and her family are from downstate, from Champaign-Urbana. Anybody here from Champaign-Urbana? Yeah. So they asked me to talk about the Middle East and explain it to you in exactly 16 minutes. And I was explaining this challenge to one of my colleagues at Johns Hopkins University last week, and I asked him, how am I going to explain what I know about the Middle East in 16 minutes? And he looked at me and he said, well, Robert, you better speak slowly. So, so that said, what I'm going to try to do is in 15 minutes talk about 3 conflicts that are going on that you won't see exactly in the day-to-day news, which is full of terrorists and violence. There are 3 underlying competitions, 3 underlying struggles that are actually driving the day-to-day events. And I'm hoping out of that you'll have both an insight into what drives the news, but you'll also have an understanding of sort of the mentalities of a lot of the people that are shaping events now in the Middle East. So let me get started. The biggest single thing driving politics in the Arab world right now is an argument over what is the proper role of religion in the society and what is the proper role of government and religion together. And there's broad disagreement from Morocco on the Atlantic coast all the way to Saudi Arabia and Oman and Iraq on the far side of the Arab world. There are militants who think that government should promote a literalist interpretation of Quranic texts. They don't want an activist judiciary, no Earl Warren Supreme Court decisions, thank you. They think it is government's job to stamp out modernity, to stamp out anything that they consider to be vice, whether it be cartons of cigarettes, like you see in the middle of the picture there, or women such as the woman here on the right, who is a very popular Lebanese singer. Her name is Nancy Ajram. Nancy Ajram sings to big audiences in places like Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Beirut and Rabat and Tunisia. And she represents another vision of society in the Arab world. People who, like Nancy Ajram and a much larger group, want a society where they have choices in terms of what do they wear, choices in terms of what they eat, choices in terms of what they drink. Do they drink alcohol or not? Choices of whether women should have professional careers rather than be obliged legally to stay at home. And so this kind of conflict is what's driving competition and driving events inside Arab countries right now. So with that background, now I can give you some idea of where this guy who's in the news now, Abu Bakr Baghdadi and the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, where does he fit in all of this? He is one extreme who is advocating the most conservative position in this argument that's underway in the Arab world right now. He believes that government belongs to God. There is no we the people. Government belongs to God. That is what he interprets the Prophet Muhammad, who founded the religion of Islam. He believes that. He believes that you don't need elections because you don't want mere mortals deciding what law would be. So you don't need elections. You need judges who will give you a literal interpretation, not an activist interpretation, a literal interpretation of old texts. That's why he wears that garb. That is the garb, that is the dress of a judge, because he is saying, I'm not elected, I am a judge interpreting the law. And he will apply old laws. For example, he says Christians must pay a special tax, because Christians in the time of the Prophet Muhammad were obliged to pay a tax. The Prophet Muhammad didn't kill them, but he did oblige them to pay a tax. So Abu Bakr Baghdadi says, Christians can stay, but they must pay a tax now, something that we hadn't seen for maybe 500 or 600 years. He insists that women stay at home, says that this is the way that the Quran originally was intended. They don't need professional careers. Their job is to complement, that's the word he uses, complement men and to raise families. And if you think he's hard on women, and you think he's hard on Christians, he's even harder on Muslims who don't agree with his interpretations. For example, that picture in the lower right is a Shia mosque. Shia do not believe in these interpretations, and he blew it up in Mosul to make a statement. So he's one extreme within this spectrum of arguments. Now here's the other. This guy also is an Islamic fundamentalist. Have any of you been to Tunisia? Oh, good place to visit. No, it is. It is. Wonderful wine there. So this guy is also an Islamic fundamentalist. His name is Rashid Ghannouchi. But unlike Abu Bakr Baghdadi and the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, this guy says, no, we need democracy. We need elections. We need an open debate in society so that we can all agree on what is the proper role for religion in our society. Don't make a mistake. This guy is a fundamentalist. He wants a conservative Muslim society. But unlike Abu Bakr Baghdadi, he's okay with elections. He's okay with working with secular politicians who don't even want a religious state. He does compromises with them. Abu Bakr Baghdadi could never compromise. That means you are accepting a certain level of evil within your government. That's what the compromise would mean. Rashid Ghannouchi is absolutely willing to compromise, so much so that when a group of labor unions, student unions, all secular, not religious, the Tunisian Bar Association and the Tunisian Chamber of Commerce went to him just about 10 months ago and said, your prime minister from your party, Mr. Ghannouchi, is not working out, and we're reaching a dead end in our revolution. Ghannouchi said, you're right. He ordered his prime minister to step down voluntarily, no violence, no accusations of treachery or anything like that, or treason. And he said, we need a new constitution, which they have agreed upon, between the Islamist side, this guy's side, Ghannouchi, and secularists, and they're having elections soon in Tunisia. In fact, you probably haven't heard about it here, but there's an election campaign underway in Tunisia, and it has Islamists, you can see in the top left there. That's a woman from Ghannouchi's party who's campaigning. Ghannouchi, by the way, said we should have 1/2 of the Tunisian parliament to be women. He agreed with that with the secularists, so that is a goal that Tunisia said it would put them way ahead of the American Congress, in fact. The bottom on the right is one of the secular parties competing against the Islamists. Notice the women there, not a single one covered. This is what I'm talking about, the competition between Islamists and secularists and how that is driving politics right now across the Arab world. This election is supposed to be on October 24th, 25th, 26th. The campaign is underway. Out of that election, they'll have a new prime minister. Don't know if it'll be one of Rashid Ghannouchi's Islamists or it'll be a secular person. We don't know. We'll see. There are election monitors over there right now from places like France and Germany and Britain who are monitoring. I think there are some American organizations there as well. And then there'll be a presidential election in November. And if Tunisia gets this right, if Tunisians are able to set up a system that everybody agrees with, then they will have made a big step forward in helping Arabs find a way through this struggle over the role of religion and government. And people in the Arab world will pay attention to this. The whole Arab Spring of 2010-11 started in Tunisia. And everybody said, wow, if the Tunisians can do it, so should we. So it matters. And if you get this wrong, you get a mess, like in Egypt, where we've had huge demonstrations with thousands killed, and a new general has taken over, replacing the peaceful protests in Tahrir Square, and Egypt has actually gone back 360 degrees. It's back where it started, with a military man running the country. And in the worst case, it ends up like Syria. The pictures on the right there are of the old market of Aleppo, as it is now above and as it used to be, where people demanded freedom, they demanded dignity, they wanted a new government. The government responded with horrific violence and triggered an entire civil war. So what's happening in Tunisia offers hope. What's happened in Egypt and Syria offers a warning. Now, there's a second huge conflict going on in the Middle East, and that is between the Shia and the Sunnis. This is a competition on a regional level and involves countries like Lebanon and Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Yemen. Iran is important in this because prior to the Iranian Revolution, the Shia, who are a minority in most Arab countries, were very quiet. They had no political rights. All of the leaders were Sunnis. Even in Iraq, where there is a majority of Shia, that's the only Arab country where Shia are majority, the Shia had no political rights. The leader of Iraq at the time was a guy named Saddam Hussein, who brutally put down the Shia. When the Americans went in 2003 and removed Saddam, the Shia rose up en masse. This is a picture of one of their commemorations in the city of Karbala. Tens of thousands of people go to these commemorations. There are several every year. And they shout two things. They shout, one, we should have fought for our leaders 1,400 years ago, and we didn't, and we're still at fault. And the second thing they shout is, the Sunnis, majority in most Arab countries, have been repressing us. And so you can immediately see this tension. The Iranians are backing these people. You are the king of Saudi Arabia, you are a Sunni. You are the president of Egypt, you are a Sunni. You are the leader of Turkey, the president of Turkey, you are a Sunni. Can you imagine when they see these demonstrations and people are so angry at the Sunnis, how that makes them feel? This is a real competition right now. And so the competition is actually being played out on the ground. In the top left, there's a picture of Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, with the former president of Iran, Ahmadinejad, and the head of the Lebanese terror group, Shia militia group, Hezbollah. And that's Hezbollah in the center on the left. Iran backs Hezbollah strongly. Hezbollah got its start blowing up the US Marines in Beirut in 1983, but now Hezbollah is on the ground fighting in Syria on behalf of the Iranian ally, Bashar al-Assad. And so the Sunnis are sending money and arms to fight against the Iranian friends in Syria. Turkey is, Qatar is, the United Arab Emirates. Syria has become a proxy war. And that's what's happening in Iraq, too. This is a Shia militia on the bottom right. These were people we were fighting in Iraq before. Now the Iranians are helping them, and sure enough, Sunnis are fighting them in Iraq. Could be the Islamic State and other Sunnis as well. And so you can see this map will show you, see the thin yellow line? That really is where Shia communities and Sunni communities come together. That fault line is where the nastiest conflicts in the Middle East are happening. And wouldn't you know, they're in Iraq and Syria, and the line goes on into Lebanon. And so looking forward, that's where we have to pay the most attention. Now, I've been talking about competition and struggle within Arab countries about the role of religion and government. I've been talking about competition between Iran and Sunni states. I haven't talked at all about Israel and the Palestinians, and there's a reason for that. all of the attention right now in the Middle East, all of it, is focused on what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Iraq, and people are looking at Lebanon with more and more concern. They're not really paying attention to what's going on in Israel and with the Palestinians. But over time, as you can see on that map, the space available for the Palestinians to form their own state. This is the two-state solution, the Israeli state and the Palestinian state. John Kerry was at a meeting yesterday in Paris talking about raising money to help rebuild Gaza after the last war. The space available for the Palestinians to create their own state is diminishing. And I worry, looking farther ahead, that as we focus on Iraq and on Syria and Lebanon, on these competitions I mentioned, that we are actually seeing the seeds being laid for no Palestinian state, and instead for this argument about the role of religion and the role of government will be transferred to yet another Middle Eastern state in the decade to come. I hope that does not come to pass, but it is moving in that direction. So thank you all very much. Please tell the professor at Johns Hopkins I managed it in 16 minutes. Thank you.